Welcome to the deep dive. We're here to cut through the noise for you.
Get straight to the insights.
Exactly. And today we are plunging into a really big legislative effort happening right now on Capitol Hill. It's being called the Big Beautiful Bill. And this isn't just, any old piece of legislation. It seems pretty pivotal for President Trump's second-term plans.
Right. And Senate Republicans are really racing against the clock here. They've set this July 4th deadline for themselves.
High stakes, then.
Very high stakes. And what's immediately clear, I think, is this central conflict. It really gets to the heart of these perennial fiscal battles in Washington.
Okay, what's the conflict?
Well, it boils down to how much to cut from welfare programs. We're talking things like Medicaid, SNAP, to pay for extending those big Trump tax breaks.
How big are we talking?
We're talking a staggering number, about $3.8 trillion. That's roughly 2.8 trillion pounds.
Wow, okay. And that cost has to be offset directly by cuts to those programs.
That's the proposal on the table, yes. So it's a really stark choice. You have these two priorities, tax cuts and social safety nets, kind of pitted against each other. And there's even division within the Republican Party on this.
Right. Okay, let's try and unpack this whole thing. This name first, the Big Beautiful Bill, it's certainly memorable.
It is quite evocative.
But then you see the reality, it's 940 pages long, and it was apparently released, shortly after midnight?
That's right. Which suggests, maybe a bit more complexity than the name implies.
Just a bit. And our sources suggest that beyond just the headline tax cuts, it's stuffed with lots of smaller policy changes, regulatory stuff.
Typical for these kinds of omnibus bills, really. Things get bundled together.
Which leaves very little time for lawmakers, let alone the public, to actually read it properly, does it?
It really doesn't. And that urgency you mentioned from Senate Republicans is palpable. They are absolutely gunning for this July 4th deadline.
You hear about leadership twisting arms.
Yes, exactly. That phrase keeps coming up, applying significant pressure, calling in favors, whatever it takes to get the votes lined up for this initial vote planned for Saturday.
So a lot of political capital being spent here, especially before they break for the summer recess.
Definitely. And it's worth remembering, this isn't starting from scratch in the Senate.
Right, the House vote. That was incredibly close, wasn't it?
Extremely. It passed by just a single vote last month.
Wow.
Which tells you just how controversial this whole package is. That tension hasn't gone away.
So that brings us back to the internal divisions you mentioned. How do they get everyone on board with this kind of trade-off, cutting welfare to fund tax breaks?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, or rather the $3.8 trillion question.
Right.
You've got, deep divisions among the rank-and-file Republicans. Some are very strong fiscal conservatives. They want deep cuts, focus on the debt. But then you have others, maybe from swing states or districts where these programs were really important, who are much more nervous about the political impact, the human impact, too.
The direct fallout on their constituents. Makes sense.
Exactly. So there's a real clash there.
And it really does circle back to those huge numbers. $3.8 trillion for tax breaks. It's almost hard to comprehend that scale.
It is. And framing the welfare cuts as the direct counterweight makes it, a very contentious kind of zero-sum game.
Yeah. Is extending tax breaks the best path for growth? Or do the social costs of the cuts outweigh that? That seems to be the core philosophical debate.
That's precisely it. And for you, the listener, this is where you can sort of see how the legislative sausage gets made, right?
Not always pretty.
Not always. The debate isn't just about the policy details, the what, but also who it affects and the underlying philosophy about government's role in its spending. It really highlights those internal party conflicts and the intense pressure on individual members.
So wrapping this up then, what does this big, beautiful bill really signify for you listening? It seems to capture this huge challenge, balancing massive tax cuts against potentially significant welfare reform.
Yeah, it's a major dilemma with very real, very immediate consequences.
So what's the final thought we should leave people with?
Well, perhaps the deeper question for you to consider is this. What are the wider implications when major legislative decisions involving vast sums of money and affecting so many people are made under such tight deadlines?
With such razor-thin margins, too.
Exactly. Does that kind of rushed process really lead to the best outcomes? Does it truly serve the public interest in the long run, or does it just kick harder questions down the road?
Leaves a lot unanswered about those long-term consequences, economic and social.
Precisely.
Okay, definitely something to think about. We hope this deep dive gave you a clearer picture of what's unfolding and what's at stake.
Thanks for joining us.